Okay, in this video I want to talk about the things which we need to check before we buy any expired domain. So this is the guide which has almost all the things you need to know about expired domains, and in this SOP we are going to especially focus on the things which you need to check before buying the expired domains. So before we buy any expired domains, we will firstly see what kind of a link profile it has. So we generally want good number of referring domains. So what are referring domains? Referring domains are unique websites which link to the expired domain which we are buying. So ideally we want to be getting any expired domain which has referring domains above 50, and most of the websites which we acquire will generally have more than 100 or 200 referring domains. So also if I want to talk about how to check at a glance if something might be spammed or not, we'll have a look at this graph on Ahrefs, where we see if there is a huge spike and then downturn in the referring domains graph. So that tells us that that domain might have been spammed in the past. So to give you context, I will show you the kind of sites that might be spammed. So let's check this out. So the site you see over here, it was spammed in the past. So you see that it used to have around 50 to 70 referring domains naturally, but it suddenly spiked up to almost 700 800. So this is a clear sign of spam, and at this point I would just go and check out if this was spam or not. Mostly it is spam most of the time, so I'll just not pay any heed to such domain and just move on. If I talk about a milder way of spam which I usually see, I'll give you an example of this. So most of the time when you check spam and you see the referring domains graph, this is the kind of graph that you see. It suddenly spikes up to a very large number and then it goes down. What happens exactly is the person spammed the site, threw in a lot of links, and when the webmasters realize that these are all spammy links, the individual webmasters remove all those links, and then we see this graph going down again. So this is one of the checkpoints that we'll keep in mind. The second thing which we have to see is the authority of the links that are coming to our site. So for example, if I talk about a domain that has very good links, we'll go to let's see, just checked out this site. So this was mildly spammed, but I bought this at a registration price and it worked out. So a good site will have do follow links from a lot of good websites. So this says that it has one do follow link, and one do follow link from HuffPost.com, which is a very high authority site. From Inc.com it has a do follow link, and it has a lot of good links from a lot of high authority websites. Let's say for example you don't know most of these sites. So a good way to see whether the links might be a good link or not would be to check the DR and the number of links they are linking out to. So if website has a very unusual number of links going out, it is usually not so good when compared to something which has a very low number of outgoing links. So that is one of the things. The third thing I want you to see most of the times is whether the links are coming to our site or not. Let's say I'm buying this domain which I bought for around $1,000, and I didn't realize that I made this mistake. the links should always be coming to your domain and um, not coming from some other domain. For example, if I say, let's say, where are the W3 links coming from or the Guardian links coming from, you'll see that all these links were coming to another domain which was not the domain which I bought. It was goengine.com and not gocreate.com. It was a 301 redirect. So what essentially happens is when this domain is owned by somebody else, all the link juice that it used to pass over here is not coming to me anymore. So that renders the purpose of buying an expired domain useless. So this was one of the mistakes that we have made in the past. So it's this gotechnologies.com also used to redirect to gocreate.com. So we have to keep that in mind when we are buying domains. And whenever there are redirects, you'll notice these sudden spikes. See, for example, this spike in the graph. So that usually gives you a sign that the domain might have been, a good domain might have been redirected, or maybe somebody spammed the domain with some redirection. So I bought this domain around at this point of time, I think, and then the other domains which used to redirect to it, they just fell off, and I'm left with less than a half of what the referring domains that it used to have. So we have to keep that in mind when we are buying any domain. Okay, so how do you really check if something was redirected to the domain or not? For that, we'll go to backlinks, and in the backlinks, we'll make sure that we have selected the historical index, and then in the link type, we'll go and see if there is a redirect chain or not. So when we select that, we'll see all the redirect chains. A lot of times you'll also see the www and the SSL links, but you'll have to go down and see if some other domain like this was redirected and this was redirected to this domain. So you have to make sure that such things do not exist most of the time, and if they do exist, they're either a very low number of such links, or if there are a lot of such links, and maybe if the domain which is being redirected to the domain which we want to buy was not good enough or was used for spamming, we'll just avoid that domain altogether. Another important thing to check when buying expired domains is whether it has historical traffic or not. Historical traffic reinforces the fact that this domain's link profile used to be really good, and it can give us very good organic traffic even in the future. So for example, if I see this domain, it used to have almost 100k traffic in the past, and then when I tested this domain, even though all the links from the other domains had dropped off, it performed really well at this point of time, with just a couple of articles. So whenever we see that kind of a site, it is a good symbol for us if it has good organic traffic in the past. So the next thing which we need to check, and this is one of the most important things after all the steps that we have done till now, we have to check the archive of this domain. What it means is the archive or the Wayback Machine, it lets us have a look at what the site used to look like in the past. So if I talk about an expired domain, which is crossculturalsolutions.com, so if we talk about what this site used to look like, we'll just go to archive.org and then plug in this domain and then browse the history. So Wayback Machine stores the history of domains and what they used to look like in the past whenever they crawl a website. So a more popular website will have a history like this, and a less popular website might have a history like this. So it will all depend on um, what kind of a domain we are having a look at. So let's say we are having a look at this domain. So what we'll do is we'll go to all these days, we'll check just 1 or 2 months of a year. We'll just hover over them and click on control and click on them to open them in new tabs, or command plus click if you are on Mac. So we'll check out all of these years in the history to see if something strange or sketchy was done, to make sure that we get a good domain for ourselves. So what I usually do is before I go to check the archive.org, I usually open hosterstats.com and I just plug in this domain over here. I'll leave the link to that in the show notes. So when we see when the hosting details have been changed or when the name servers were changed, that gives us an idea of at what point of time the domain might have been spammed. So this was registered in around December 2020. Then in 21 it was transferred in January to March, and then the changes have been made. So we'll specially go through these timelines to check to see if it was spammed in the past or not. So while all of this opens, we see that even till 2020 this used to be a site which it used to look like even back in 2016-15, and it has a consistent history. That means that this domain was owned by the same person for most of the time, and maybe they might have redesigned a few things here and there, but this domain was owned by the same person, and that tells us that okay, this is a clean domain. A lot of times you'll see 403 forbidden or something, and or you might see redirection or something for the green things that we see. That means that the domain was redirected. So whenever it is redirected, you will get to see redirection notice before the web page is opened. The redirected web page is open. So the other red flag while checking the archive is you see a forbidden error, or you see a blank page for an entire year or so. So that says that that tells us that the Wayback Machine crawler was blocked from saving the domain details, and that is the red signal that we usually want to avoid. So the other thing that we check, and it usually won't matter a lot, but a good age is a very good factor for us. So if the domain is very aged, then it is also a good signal for us. So the third thing that we check is unwanted spam links. So unwanted spam links can be identified by checking the anchors. So if we check the anchors of this domain, let's say I go here, I see things like casino tips or something, and this domain didn't used to be anything related to casino tips. Or I'll see Viagra, or I'll see any prescription drugs without prescription, or something like 10 mg of this thing or that thing. So Uggs boots or some sale or Nike sale or something. At that point of time, I'll know that this domain has been used for spam, and I'll reject that domain. This is not a very critical factor, because if any domain has been expired for a long time, then it won't necessarily be indexed. So let's say I am thinking of purchasing this expired domain. So I'll just go to Google. I'll just type in my URL bar itself if you have Google searches enabled. I'll just type cache and see if this is cached or not. So this shows me that it was redirected to drop cache, and if it was not redirected, I'll just go and see if it is indexed in Google or not. So I see that this domain is indexed and it has around 120 pages indexed in Google. That means that this domain is not penalized, most probably. So that is one thing. The next thing that we'll check is the repurpose count. A lot of times people will buy expired domains and then they'll let it drop, and then somebody else buys that domain and then they will let it drop. That usually tells us that that domain was not powerful enough for them, and that might mean that it is not powerful enough for us as well if it has been repurposed a lot of times and then they let it drop. So I usually have any expired domain which has a drop count, low drop count, or something which has not been repurposed a lot of times, in the sense that it didn't lose its essence of the original topic which it used to be about. That is important. I talked about redirect chains right in the beginning, that there should be no 301 redirection to that expired domain. And the next thing is we need to check for copyright strikes. So if I talk about copyright strikes, let's say there's this domain which has a lot of onhacks.io. They do a lot of piracy and other stuff, so there will be a lot of DMCA takedown notices against them. So we want to avoid any domain which had a lot of copyright strikes on it, because that affects its power to perform in search engines. Trademarks are not very important if they don't come from very big brands, but in general we'll want to avoid trademarks if they don't if the domain doesn't have a lot of good links. But if the trademark is from a company which maybe went bankrupt or something, or they didn't even have the money to renew their domain itself, so that is not a problem at all. We can go ahead with that domain, because somebody who didn't renew their domain won't essentially sue us for using their domain. We just want to avoid big brands like these, or Apollo or something, because if they go against us, then it is going to be trouble. Okay, next thing that I want to talk about is some common myths which we want to avoid falling into. One of the main things that a lot of people care about is spam score, which doesn't really matter. For instance, I just plugged in Nike.com in Moz, and it has a spam score of 9%. So a site like Nike won't necessarily be penalized or something. To understand what spam score actually is, I have linked out to their blog post, which also has a video where they have explained how spam score is really calculated, and it is just an indicator of risks that you might have, and you can easily have all these flags cleared if you want. Chinese, Japanese links are not a big problem if they are relevant to your domain, or any other foreign language links, but most of the time you will have very spammy links if they are coming from any other language, if it is not related to your domain. And the other thing that a lot of people care about is drop count. It is not a huge issue, but ideally you should avoid a lot of drops if you see them. And to see how many times it has been deleted, again you can go to Hostostats and see how many times it was deleted. So this one was deleted only once, and that is right now. So as I told you that if it is not indexed in Google, it means that maybe it has remained expired for a very long time or something. so it is also not a very big issue, but and around the side of caution saves the day, so you just need to be sure about it. If any domain was redirected to some other domain, let's say xyz.com was redirected to abc.com, and then xyz.com was let to expire. At that point of time, that doesn't mean that xyz.com is not a very good domain and it can't be used. I have used such domains, so redirections to any relevant brands or relevant things doesn't essentially eat away the link juice, so that is a point to be noted. And the most important thing that I see a lot of people stressing around at is DAPA, TFCF, or DRU, or any other metrics that are popular. Matrices are good for filtering domains, but we should not be absolutely stuck with some matrices in mind which don't let us buy some good domains for our business. So I think that's it for checking out expired domains. If you want any more details, feel free to message me or ask any other team member to clear any doubts if you have.